What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. So I'm going over my favorite waiver wire ads ahead of Week 9 in the NFL. We just wrapped up Week 8. It was a really interesting week so far. Really, just a lot of surprises happened across the NFL. A lot of injury updates as well, especially at the quarterback position. Things that we need to keep into account or keep in mind going forward. There's going to be a lot of changes and a lot of shakeup across the NFL. We know that there's shocking things that happen every single week. We just saw the Denver Broncos beat the Kansas City Chiefs by 15 points. There's different things that can happen every single week, and we need to stay prepared and make sure that we adjust as the NFL changes and make sure that we make our teams better as the season goes on and on. Waivers are one of the best ways to do that. It's super fun as well, diving into some of these deeper players, adding guys before the rest of your league is ready for them to perform, and making sure you have them on your roster when they do perform. So waivers is one of the best ways to make sure we get our teams better. We've got a lot more buys picking up again. We had no buys in Week 8, but we're going to have a lot of buys in Week 9, a lot of injuries as well. So a lot of you guys are going to need to be really diving deep into that waiver wire to help find yourself some either quality bench stashes or quality guys that maybe you can throw into your starting lineup as well this week. So hopefully these players help you out. If you guys feel like I missed any players that should have been listed on these lists, feel free to let me know. Let me know in the comments. I'm happy to help you guys there. If you guys have any specific ad or drop questions that you're still sort of torn on, any Fab specific questions as well, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm happy to help you out there. I always say that I try to not talk about Fab too much on these videos because I think Fab is super league dependent, super roster dependent. And there's just too much variability that I don't want to say that okay, you should spend 15% of your fab on one running back when maybe you're in an 18 league or an 18 team league or maybe you're in a 10 team league and the cost that you'd spend on those guys could be very different. Maybe you really need a running back, so you should be able to spend a little bit extra. It's just so context driven that I don't want to give you guys fab direction because there's just so much context there. So if you guys want specific fab advice, let me know in the comments. Be as detailed as you can. I can help you out there and hopefully help you guys make the best moves possible. So yeah, with that being said, let's just get us started off with the quarterbacks here. So starting things off with the quarterback position, I'll start things off with Kyler Murray. It sounds like Joshua Dobbs is not going to be the starter for the Arizona Cardinals in Week 9. They sound pretty heavily like they're leaning towards starting Clayton Tune in Week 9, which would mean Kyler Murray will return in Week 10 against the Atlanta Falcons. Kyler Murray, when he returns, I fully expect to be almost what Kyler Murray used to be prior to his injury. Obviously, I'm not going to bank on that top 5 production, but I personally have been stashing Kyler Murray in a couple leagues since the beginning of the season. He's been on my IR there, especially in leagues where I sort of went late RB or late quarterback drafting strategy. Kyler Murray is going to come in, and assuming he's healthy, he should be an immediate top 10 performer at the quarterback position. There are enough weapons in this offense, especially when James Conner comes back in Week 11. They're going to have him, Marquise Brown, Michael Wilson looks good, Rondale Moore's plenty good. We saw Trey McBride perform at a super high level this week. We'll talk about him more later. I think Kyler Murray's got enough weapons, and he's got enough versatility on the ground that if he is fully healthy, he could easily be a rock solid fantasy starter for you guys. So even if you have a good quarterback, it doesn't hurt to go add Kyler Murray if he performs at a high level. You can trade him, get yourself a second, or get yourself a nice piece as well to help fill out your lineup. So Kyler Murray does absolutely need to be rostered at this point. Sam Howell, he continues to perform at a really high level, especially against the Philadelphia Eagles. He had about 400 passing yards and 4 touchdowns in this one. They've got really good weapons in this offense. They've got Terry McLaurin, who actually played really poorly this last week, had a lot of drops, 12 targets and only 5 receptions. Terry McLaurin will play a lot better going forward. We saw Jahan Dotson get involved. Jamison Crowder got really involved for them. We did see Curtis Samuel get banged up, but Jamison Crowder is a perfectly fine wide receiver 3. Logan Thomas is a really talented tight end. He's performing at a high level. They've got good running backs in Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson. Sam Howell's been really solid so far this season. They've got a beatable matchup against the New England Patriots in Week 9, and then they get Seattle in Week 10, which is a really plus matchup for opposing quarterbacks. So I think Sam Howell is definitely a really nice streaming option, and I've got one league where I've got Kirk Cousins as my quarterback. We lost him due to injury this week. He tore his Achilles, unfortunately. He's going to miss the entire rest of the season. That means that I need a quarterback, and I'm probably going to be looking towards Sam Howell. I've got Kyler Murray on my bench or on my IR as well in that league, so hopefully I can fill that in with Kyler Murray eventually. But I think Sam Howell is going to be a guy that we can rely on almost on a weekly basis. And then in deeper leagues, I'll just bring up Will Levis. Maybe it's Will Levis. I'll try and iron that out and get you guys updated and make sure I start pronouncing that appropriately. But regardless, he performed at an extremely high level for the Tennessee Titans in his first debut start. He had 4 passing touchdowns. He just had a really pretty deep ball as well. He made 3 really great deep passes, 2 to Hopkins, 1 to Nick Westbrook-Akine. He's just a really talented arm. I don't think he's obviously he's not going to throw for 4 touchdowns every single week. This is still going to be a Titans team that wants to run the ball a lot, and I don't expect them to have a ton of success this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers because we know the Steelers are, they're an established defense. They are always really good across the board, and they're a really well-coached team, so I bet they sort of hold him in. But if we see Will Levis perform at a high level on Thursday, I do think he could actually be a guy that maybe we want to look at, especially in 2 quarterback leagues. He absolutely needs to be rostered, and there is potential upside here for him eventually going forward because, he's got DeAndre Hopkins, Traylon Burks is getting healthier, Chigakonkwo's there, Derrick Henry's a good running back, obviously, Spears is good out of the backfield as well, so there's enough weapons here that he could perform at a high level, and he's just enough of an unknown that if you're set at quarterback and don't need to start this week, you could roster him to see what happens. Next up, we've got the running back position. This one's going to be a long list, I like normal, but I'll start things off with Gus Edwards, who found the end zone 3 times this week against the Arizona Cardinals. Obviously, you're not going to get to play the Arizona Cardinals every week. He's not going to perform at this high of a level every single week, but he continues to see a lot of volume for this team. He had 21 touches so far in this game. They're using him as a receiver just a little bit more than he has been used historically. Coming into the season, he really had, I think it was 4 or 5 receptions in his entire career. Don't quote me on that, but I know it was very few, and he's caught a couple passes in each of the last few games. He's involved enough as a pass catcher. This offense is performing just at a really high level as well. There's going to be a lot of scoring opportunities, and he is their preferred goal line back. So I guess Edwards does need to be rostered. I think he's a low-end running back, too, the rest of the season, it seems like. Zach Charbonnet, I've got to bring up. We saw him out-snap Kenneth Walker this last week, 31 to 25 snaps. Obviously, Kenneth Walker's been an elite performer so far for them as well, but Zach Charbonnet looked absolutely fantastic. I think there's a lot of reason to believe that we could see the Seahawks sort of go towards a committee approach here, sort of what the fears were coming into the season with Kenneth Walker, but really, I think this is a team that they know if they keep loading up Ken Walker the way they have been. He's been banged up the last few weeks. He hasn't missed time, but he's just clearly not 100% right now. It makes a lot of sense for them to dial back his workload. I think it just really is going to be beneficial for the Seahawks to give Zach Charbonnet a lot more work, and Charbonnet's a good player. He does need to be on rosters for sure. He could be used in a pinch as a running back too with the volume he's seeing now, and if Kenneth Walker does get hurt, obviously you've got a top 10 running back in Charbonnet, so he needs to be rostered for sure. Mari DeMercado had 20 carries this last week. It only turned into 8.9 PPR fantasy points. Obviously not exactly what we want to see, but he is clearly the running back 1 in Arizona. I know it was a little disappointing because it really seemed like he didn't get any work in the entire fourth quarter. Obviously, it fell off a little bit, but DeMercado getting 20 carries with that much volume, he's very clearly the preferred back behind James Conner. He needs to be on rosters. You've got 2 more weeks here with him, and he's a guy that you can certainly roll with and potentially start this week, even though it is a really tough matchup against Cleveland. Cam Akers, I think he needs to be rostered as well. We saw him sort of take the lead in that backfield in Minnesota. Alexander Mattison did finish the game with 16 carries, but for only 31 yards. He just didn't really look good. Not that Cam Akers looked great either, but Cam Akers did get the goal line work, did score the touchdown. I don't think either one of these guys is going to be a super high-end performer, especially in Minnesota without Kirk Cousins. Scoring opportunities should go down, but we could see a scenario where this team tries to lean on their running game. Maybe they run the ball 30 to 40 times a week, and these 2 backs have had success so earlier on in their careers. They're talented enough. They did have some success as a team running the ball at spurts this season, so Cam Akers needs to be rostered. I don't want to play him this week by any means, but there is certainly potential here that he takes over that backfield, and this could become a run-heavy team going forward. So Akers does need to be on rosters. Roschon Johnson in his first game back for the Chicago Bears didn't do a whole lot, but I still think he's pretty clearly the most talented running back in Chicago, the most versatile back for sure. He'll probably be the preferred pass catcher. I bet we see a snap share increase next week after he's been a little bit more healthy, a little bit more acclimated into the offense in practice. Needs to be rostered just to see what happens, but you don't need to play him by any means, and I totally get it if you're in a shallow league if you don't want to roster him. Tajay Spears needs to be on rosters as well. He continues to operate as the second back behind Derrick Henry. We could see this offense potentially take a step forward if Will Levis is actually legit. If this offense takes a step forward, we could see Spears be much more involved as a pass catcher. He's clearly their preferred option on third downs. And if this offense improves, we could see a lot more scoring opportunities. And there is still technically a chance that Derrick Henry gets moved before tomorrow's deadline. Today's deadline for when you guys are watching this video. So see what happens there. I bet Derrick Henry stays put, but even with that, there's always this possibility of an injury there. So Spears is one of the premier handcuffs in the NFL. He's usable, especially in PPR formats, and there is a world that exists where he ends up being a top 10 running back down the stretch due to a trade or an injury. After that, Chuba Hubbard, I think he needs to be rostered as well. Obviously, he didn't have a really high-end performance this last week, but he did very clearly take the lead role ahead of Miles Sanders. We only saw Miles Sanders get 2 carries in this game, finished with a whopping 0 fantasy points. I think that could have been a product of the injury status of Miles Sanders. I think we will see Miles Sanders sort of regain some control in that backfield, so I wouldn't drop Miles Sanders by any means, but you're not going to play Miles Sanders until you see that change happen. Chuba Hubbard does seem like the preferred running back in Carolina for now. Obviously, he didn't perform at a really high level either this last week, but I think you can roster Chuba Hubbard for sure, and if you needed to play him as like a desperation running back too, you could do that. After that, I want to bring up Leonard Fournette. He recently signed with the Buffalo Bills. It sort of seems to me like he's probably just going to take over the Latavius Murray role in this offense. He is a really talented pass catcher, really good in pass protection. Latavius Murray has just been brutal near the goal line as well. He hasn't been able to get in the end zone despite being given several opportunities. We could see Leonard Fournette take that goal line role, take that third down passing role as well in this offense. For whatever reason, the Bills just don't want to give James Cook as many opportunities as we want them to. Leonard Fournette's a proven commodity in the NFL. It sounds like he stayed in shape. He does have a non-zero chance of becoming like a solid running back 2 for you guys. So he needs to be rostered just to see what happens. Probably ends up just being like a touchdown dependent, low end flex play for you guys, but you could certainly pick him up and do a lot worse than him. He does need to be on rosters, especially in deeper leagues. Then we got the 2 Rams running backs, Darrell Henderson and Royce Freeman. Darrell Henderson did have the better game again this last week. He is clearly the preferred option here, but we saw Matthew Stafford leave this game with, I believe it's a UCL strain. He injured his thumb. If you saw, he sort of got it caught in the defender's helmet when he threw the ball. Sounds like he's week to week, it sounds like. So we'll see what happens there with Matthew Stafford, but they haven't ruled out IR. If he gets placed on IR, I think it's going to be a huge hit to this Rams offense in general. I'm not excited about either one of these running backs, but they could, like sort of like similar with the Vikings, we could see the Rams become a much more run-heavy team. Might have to dump it down a lot more and not be able to get the ball downfield. There could be a lot more pass-catching opportunities for the running backs. I think there's reason to be at least continuing to roster these guys, and there is certainly reason to consider using them as like low-end running back 2s going forward if you're dealing with bye weeks. They should be on rosters. Jeff Wilson, he got more involved with the Miami Dolphins this last week. Didn't turn into a high-end performance. Raheem Mostert is still the guy we want to roster there. But if you're in deeper leagues, if you want to play Jeff Wilson this next week, they play the Kansas City Chiefs. It could be a shootout game there. The Chiefs should get right on offense. And Jeff Wilson, I mean, he's a part, now albeit a small part, but he's a part of a really high-end offense. You could do a lot worse than rostering him. And obviously, if something happened to Mostert, you'd probably have the starting running back for the Dolphins until Devon Achane comes back. Then Devin Singletary, I'll bring him up again. He continued to operate as the pass-catching guy for the Houston Texans. Dameon Pierce just continues to be ineffective. He had 12 carries for 46 yards, didn't catch a pass, didn't score a touchdown, although he did have one called back. Devin Singletary, he seems like the most explosive player in the backfield for Houston. He does need to be on rosters, and especially in PPR formats, you could use him as a desperation flex if you needed to. Next up, we've got the wide receiver position, and I think there are actually a lot of really good names on this list. I'll start things off with Josh Downs, who I've mentioned several times already, and he's still only rostered, and I believe it's 52% of leagues right now. He absolutely needs to be rostered in pretty much every single PPR league, and honestly half PPR and even non-PPR leagues. He's just got to be a focal point of people's rosters at this point. He continues to get it done for the Indianapolis Colts, who continue to throw the ball a ton. He had another 7 catches for 70 yards in this one. That's a really great baseline for a guy who's just seeing a ton of targets. It's a really, honestly, concentrated target tree in Indianapolis between Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, and the running backs. They aren't really utilizing the tight ends or Alec Pierce very much. So there's a lot of targets to go around for Joshua Downs, and I think he's just got to be on rosters right now. So if he's for whatever reason still available, he's a priority pickup for sure. After that, I want to talk about Demario Douglas. He's the rookie wide receiver for the New England Patriots. Continues to perform well for them. He's actually gotten on the field quite a bit more over the last couple of weeks. 2 weeks ago against the Buffalo Bills, sort of had a bit of a breakout performance. Didn't do a ton this last week against the Miami Dolphins, but we saw Kendrick Bourne leave the game with injury. Unfortunately for Kendrick Bourne, that turned out to be a torn ACL. That's going to sideline him for obviously the rest of the season. Hopefully he can come back relatively quickly next season. On top of that, we saw Devontae Parker leave this game with an injury. Juju Smith-Schuster has not been a real focal point of this offense at all. So Demario Douglas is probably the wide receiver 1 in this offense the rest of the season. I know that's not exactly extremely valuable in this offense because of how poor they've looked, but they've looked a little bit better over the last few weeks. They've got some plus matchups going forward. They play the Washington Commanders this next week. I think you could stream Demario Douglas, especially in PPR formats. And he's a guy that I definitely want rostered. And even in Dynasty, you could see him on your waiver wire. He needs to be rostered there, especially. He's a guy that, he's a young player. He's got some talent. I think he could have some real flex value down the stretch this season. After that, we got Rashid Shaheed. He only played 27% of the snaps for the New Orleans Saints, but he just continues to be a really key cog in this offense in terms of how they want to stretch the field. He had 3 catches for 153 yards and a touchdown. That's obviously the high end of what you're expecting out of Rashid Shaheed in any given week, but he's an elite player. He's a really talented player down the field. He can do a lot with the ball in open space as well, and he's always a threat to score. So if you want to keep him on your roster and he's just a guy that can give you that extra bump up in terms of upside as a flex play. We could potentially see them utilize him more down the stretch as well. He seems to have a really high end relationship with Derek Carr. Derek Carr likes throwing the ball to him downfield. He's giving him a lot of chances, and for whatever reason, Derek Carr's connection with him down the field is just way better than with Chris Olave right now. Chris Olave's doing fine so far, but he's obviously not seen that high level of volume or that level of production that we wanted him to. This is a bit more of an even distribution in this pass catching core. Rashid Shaheed, with how much the Saints are throwing the ball, absolutely needs to be rostered. They've got a really great matchup this week against the Chicago Bears, and if you wanted to flex Shaheed, I think you actually could do that this week. After that, I want to talk about Quentin Johnston. He had 5 catches for 50 yards this last week against the Chicago Bears. Obviously, that's nothing special to write about, but it was just really promising to see Quentin Johnston actually see some involvement in the offense. He looked like a more talented wide receiver this week than he's looked like so far in the NFL. Maybe he's sort of getting his feet underneath him. Obviously, they've got a really tough matchup this next week. They play the New York Jets. That's certainly not something that we're excited about, but I think he definitely needs to be on rosters. He's obviously the second wide receiver selected in the NFL draft this year. He was selected to effectively take over that Mike Williams role sort of in this offense at some point, and he's been thrust into the position to do that. He just hasn't really excelled in that situation yet. On top of that, Joshua Palmer is dealing with what seems to be a knee injury, or we know it's a knee injury. We don't know exactly what the nature of that injury is, but he played through it, really gutted it out, but he just really didn't look 100%. He obviously left the game at one point on Monday as well, Sunday night as well. Joshua Palmer is not 100%. Keenan Allen is obviously getting up there in age, and obviously there's just a lot of opportunity for Quentin Johnson to potentially see a lot more time on the field. He's a talented player. He should get more involved, and he does need to be on rosters, though I don't want to play him this week, so he's more of a stash. And if you need somebody to play this week, then I don't think Johnson's your guy. Khalil Shakir is someone I'll talk about as well. I mentioned him last week as a waiver option, sort of as like a deep league dart throw if you really want to take a look at it. We mentioned that the Bills were going to need to throw the ball little bit more without Dawson Knox and also to run a lot more three wide receiver sets. And we saw exactly that. And it was Khalil Shakir who clearly stepped in as that third wide receiver, not Deontay Hardy. The concern would have been that maybe they split it and made it like a half and half thing, sort of like what we saw a lot of the time last year with like Isaiah McKenzie and Jamison Crowder sort of splitting. But there have been several times over the course of the years where when the Bills do have a clear-cut third wide receiver, especially the kind of guy that operates in the slot, he sees a lot of targets. He's a guy that it's a position and really a role in this offense that's been fantasy viable over the years, and I think it could continue to be if you're in a deeper league, especially a PPR format. I think Khalil Shakir could be used as a deep league flex play, especially in plus matchups going forward. So I think that he does kind of need to be rostered in deeper leagues, and if there were ever an injury to Gabe Davis or Stephon Diggs, he would obviously be a really solid start for you guys. After that, I'll talk about Michael Wilson. Continues to play well when given limited opportunities, but I think he's a talented player, and sooner or later we're going to see Kyler Murray return for this offense. Sounds like we're going to see Clayton Tune in Week 9, which is obviously not something to be excited about, but when we get to Week 10, we should see Kyler Murray against the Atlanta Falcons. I think eventually we could see Michael Wilson be a useful fantasy asset, and if he's on waivers and you don't need a guy that you want to play just yet, I think Michael Wilson has a shot to be useful down the stretch. KJ Osborne's another guy I'll talk about. Obviously, we saw him take over as effectively the number one wide receiver in this offense this last week. Obviously, Addison looked great, and Hawkinson was super involved as well, but KJ Osborne performed really well. He was extremely involved for this offense, and he's just a good player. The Vikings, however, are not a team that I'm super excited about going forward, obviously, with the injury to Kirk Cousins. So that is a bit of a bummer, but they've got a plus matchup this next week, and I think you could potentially stream KJ Osborne if you needed to. We'll see what they do. The trade deadline is going to be today at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so we'll see what happens with them at the quarterback position. But I'm assuming they'll trade for some sort of veteran. Nick Mullins will come back in Week 10 as well. He's proven to be decent enough, a bit of a distributor, so this could be a decent enough offense, and Osborne's going to be useful enough while Justin Jefferson's out that you can use him. After that, we got some names that I want to talk about. We got Tank Dell and JSN, the two rookies. Tank Dell, I know he came back and had a bit of a dud performance against the Carolina Panthers this week. If for whatever reason he got dropped and is unrostered, he needs to be picked up. Maybe you want to see him perform at a high level before you trust him in your lineup again, but he's a good player. He'll be utilized in this offense. He's the clear number 2 wide receiver, and I think better days are ahead for this Texans offense. There's just going to be some bumps in the road, obviously dealing with a rookie quarterback, but Tank Dell does need to be on rosters for sure. JSN scored a touchdown in 2 straight weeks. He looks to be really stepping up into that clear number 3 wide receiver role in this offense. They're sort of distributing it a little bit more as well. They're not solely focusing on Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. We've even seen Jake Bobo get involved. I think JSN's a guy that needs to be on rosters. He's probably not a must-start by any means until we see potentially an injury to one of the other two. But JSN needs to be on rosters. He's super talented, and there's always a chance that maybe the talent just wins out and he ends up surpassing one of those two on the depth chart. After that, Jonathan Mingo, I really want to bring him up. I talked about him a little bit last week as what could potentially be a nice deeper league ad, and I think he absolutely needs to be on rosters at this point. He's a guy who actually led the Carolina Panthers in snaps. This was a week after their bye where they switched play callers. We talked about how maybe this Carolina Panthers offense could see some changes going into week 8, and those changes would probably be indicative of what we're going to see going forward, and I think that's really going to be true with Jonathan Mingo. I think he and Adam Thielen are going to operate as the clear number 1 and 2 wide receivers in this offense. Mingo should be trending up over the course of the season, while Thielen probably trends down just due to the nature of his age. Is probably going to wear down over the course of the season. Mingo should trend up as he gets more and more comfortable in the offense, more and more comfortable being on the NFL field. So Mingo needs to be on rosters. I think he's a talented player. I think he's got a shot to emerge as the number 1 wide receiver in this offense, and he's definitely someone that I want on my roster, and definitely someone that you can play if you need to, because the Panthers can't run the ball at all right now. They're probably going to give up a lot of points down the stretch as well. They'll probably have to air it out quite a bit, and I think Mingo's a guy that can perform at a high enough level that you could see yourself flexing him down the stretch here. And last, I'll talk about Tyler Boyd. He actually ran a lot of routes this last week. We saw T. Higgins sort of come on and off the field as well. Perhaps T. Higgins just isn't quite 100%. We could see a lot more Tyler Boyd going forward. And Joe Burrow just looked incredible in Week 8. He's clearly back to 100%. This is going to be a high-end offense for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think you can actually flex Tyler Boyd going forward. Obviously, I don't expect him to score a touchdown every week like he did, but we've seen him perform at a high enough level in the past. We know Boyd is he's a known commodity. He's a good player in the NFL. He's involved in the offense. It's a really good offense. So Tyler Boyd's like a nice just stash and play him if you need him sort of flex option and someone that could really help get you through a bind. So I think Tyler Boyd does need to be on more rosters than he is right now. Next, we got the tight end position. There's actually a lot of names here that I think I'm really excited about as well. And I'll start off with what I would prioritize as my number one tight end my number one tight end ad this week, and potentially my number one ad overall, and that would be Trey McBride. He looked really great this last week. He had 10 catches, tied the Arizona Cardinals record for most receptions in a game by a tight end, scored a touchdown, just looked really good, and I think he's got a legitimate shot to be the number 2 target in this offense going forward behind Marquise Brown. I talked about it earlier that Kyler Murray should return to this offense and obviously elevate them. There should be a lot more scoring opportunities for them going forward. Obviously, I'm not expecting Trey McBride to fall in the end zone every week, nor is he going to catch 10 passes every single week, but he's on a list with just Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez in terms of tight ends under 20 or 24 years or younger who have caught 10 passes in a game. He was drafted to be really great. He ran a 4.56 40. He's an athletic specimen. We saw him put up a big game at the end of last season as well as a rookie. He's a good player. He was drafted to be good, and Zach Ertz is going to be on IR for at least another 3 games. Trey McBride should easily slot into being their tight end 1. He's definitely a guy that needs to be on rosters, and he's probably a tight end 1 in fantasy the rest of the season. After that, Dalton Kincaid, sort of the same thing, drafted to be great. Injury ahead of him to Dawson Knox opened up an opportunity for him, and he performed at a really high level this last week. He's very clearly an elite athlete. He's a guy that looked really good on the field. He's performing well with that role, and he's obviously a part of a really great offense. So Dalton Kincaid is also a must-start tight end going forward. If you got him on waivers, keep playing him. Even if you have, I picked him up in a league where I have Travis Kelce. I actually ended up flexing Kincaid because I had a lot of injuries that week, so needed to put that flex in, and it really worked out for me. And I could see myself trading Kincaid for another player. Should be able to get a high-end asset, or I could even consider looking to trade Kelce if I got a lot there. But it gives you a lot of flexibility if you get Kincaid. He's a guy that's going to be a performer for you and someone that I'm actually confident in going forward. After that, we got some guys that I'm a little bit less confident in, but I'll start with Taysom Hill. Obviously, he scored 2 touchdowns again this week. Only had 1 target, so that's obviously not super exciting. We saw Jawan Johnson return to the lineup, and his role as a real tight end in the NFL sort of went away. So there is that to deal with, but he's effectively being used as a goal line running back. The Saints offense should have a lot of success again against a really bad Bears defense this next week. I don't know that he'll be used as a pass catcher very often, but they'll probably get down near the goal line quite a bit. You could see him come in and steal some touchdowns, which is annoying for everyone else, but Taysom Hill could easily be like a deep league streamer at tight end, and you could do a lot worse. So if you want to play him, you can do that. Logan Thomas continues to be involved for the Washington Commanders. They're throwing the ball a ton, airing it out really effectively as well. They have a sort of tougher matchup against the New England Patriots this week. It's not a scary matchup by any means, but it's not someone that's abusable like the Philadelphia Eagles have been. So I don't love the matchup, but Logan Thomas is involved, and especially in PPR formats, he's someone that I'm comfortable playing. And then Jake Ferguson, we saw him be really involved with the Dallas Cowboys again this last week. Had a really athletic catch on a touchdown pass early in the game. This Cowboys offense looks like it's really taking a step forward. We saw them just absolutely clobber the Los Angeles Rams this week. It's a good offense. He's an effective part of their plan. He's very clearly the tight end 1 in this offense, arguably the number 2 target as well, behind obviously CeeDee Lamb. He's got a shot to be a really useful fantasy tight end down the stretch, and especially being through his bye, he's someone that I could see just picking up and riding the rest of the season if you want to. And last but certainly not least, we've got the defenses. Nothing that really stands out as a super great option here, but I'll start things off with the Tennessee Titans. They've got a matchup against the Minnesota Vikings this next week, who haven't been able to run the ball very effectively yet this season, and the Tennessee Titans actually have a really high-end run defense. They will easily keep Alexander Mattison and Cam Akers in check, and then the Vikings will be turning over to potentially a rookie quarterback who didn't look very good this last week in limited opportunity. He got strip sacked, didn't look comfortable in the pocket. We could see the Vikings add a veteran this week, potentially before the deadline. You probably will know that by the time you're watching this video, but regardless of that, you're going to see you will see a new quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings next week. It's going to be a downgrade. The Titans are a good enough defense, even though they can get beat through the air. You could do a lot worse than the Titans this week. The Cleveland Browns are another team I'll talk about. They've got a really great matchup this next week against the Arizona Cardinals. They're certainly a team that has been a high-end performing defense for the last several weeks. Obviously, they're an elite defense. They make plays happen. They get a lot of sacks. They create turnovers, and they need to be on rosters for sure. But if for whatever reason they're not rostered, they need to be picked up, and you can use them the rest of the season. The New Orleans Saints, Really good defense again so far this season, and they get to play the Chicago Bears this next week. I don't really need to say much more. They're a really great option. They might be my preferred pickup this week. However, I do prefer the Cleveland Browns just going forward as well. And then the Atlanta Falcons, they've got a nice matchup as well this week. You could certainly do a lot worse than them. They've got a really great run defense. A.J. Terrell is an elite corner. They get a couple sacks, and they're a decent enough defense that they could be rostered and could perform at a high level this week. So I could see yourselves drafting or picking up the Falcons and playing them if you need to as well. So that'll do it for this week's Waiver Wire video. Up next, I'll be going over my top trade targets, players that I'm looking to buy low on and sell high on ahead of week 9. So stay tuned for those videos. I'll do one video on each like I've normally been doing. So you'll get 2 videos tomorrow. All you've got to do to make sure you get access to those, just subscribe to the channel. That way you get access to every video I put out. Thursday morning, you guys will get the Thursday Night Football primer, and then Saturday morning, you guys will get a start-sit video where I go over every single matchup in Week 9, help you guys get your lineup set, and then Sunday morning, 1 hour before the morning games kick off, I'll be doing my live stream as usual, helping you guys answer any of those last-minute start-sit questions, giving you guys any up-to-the-minute advice or news in terms of injuries, and making sure you guys are prepared and as informed as possible heading into the games. So hopefully you guys like the video. If you do, just please give it a thumbs up. It really helps with the algorithm. As always, if you guys have any questions, drop a comment in there. If you want any help with anything, I'm happy to help you guys get your lineup set, get those waiver ads put in, and hopefully we can help keeping you guys push forward this season, hopefully navigate towards some fantasy championships. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.